Altcoin season isn't a question of if, but when. And this has left everyone wondering which coins will perform the best when the FOMO finally kicks in. And one of these answers could be Sui, and it recently experienced some explosive growth. Believe it or not, but this rally could have been the starting gun for altcoin season, and a sign that Sui will be one of the fastest movers. And that's why today we're going to bring you up to speed on what they have been up to, and take a closer look at Sui's price action and see where it could be headed next. Stay tuned. I'll start by saying that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's purely educational content intended to inform you about Sui. And I'll also note that some members of the Coin Bureau team hold Sui in our portfolios, but we will be as objective as possible in our analysis. I mean, we're able to do this because none of our altcoin reviews are sponsored in any way. Cool?
Cool.
That said, it's been less than 3 months since we covered Sui, so we're going to assume that you're pretty familiar with what the project is and how it works. If you're not, you can watch the first section of our previous Sui update for a quick recap. The link will be down in the description. You're welcome. Now, in June, Miston Labs, which is of course the company behind Sui, announced Walrus, a decentralized storage and data availability protocol. For context, Sui's endgame is to decentralize the entire internet. And to that end, they're going to need lots of decentralized storage. And it seems they're using their own solution for this. This is a timely announcement, given that they recently stopped counting the number of full nodes on their blockchain. But we'll come back to that a bit later. Another thing that Sui announced in June was that the crypto custodian named Copper would offer Sui custody and staking for its clients. For reference, Copper works almost exclusively with institutional investors and high net worth individuals. And this highlights the fact that there's lots of interest in the next Solanas such as Sui, which is not really surprising given how popular Solana really is. On that note, in July, Sui provided updates about the development of its own native bridge, which seems to have recently launched. For those unaware, Solana has basically been building out its own infrastructure with the Pyth network oracle and the wormhole bridge. Sui seems to be doing something similar. Speaking of which, Sui also announced that Amazon Web Services, or AWS, has added support for its blockchain, and this would make it possible for builders to deploy full nodes on its cloud. FYI, Alibaba announced a similar support earlier this year, and it seems that Sui is quite close with Chinese tech giants. Look no further than its partnership with Binance's tech arm. That's also in our previous update. Now, as a cherry on top, Sui announced that a Californian firm called ETZ had somehow made it possible for Americans to invest in Sui via their individual retirement accounts or IRAs. In plain English, those saving for retirement can opt to stack some Sui and do so all while optimizing their taxes. It's pretty cool. Earlier this month, Miston Labs announced that Sui NS would be decentralizing. To bring you up to speed, Sui NS is a protocol that makes it possible to have human-readable wallet addresses, like, for example, nick.sui. Oh, and I don't actually own nick.sui, in case you guys were thinking of sending me some crypto. But if you did want to send me something, how about some likes to boost that algorithm? Also, be sure to smash that subscribe button and ping the notification bell as well to make sure you're not missing any of this crypto alpha. Anyways, Sui NS actually tweaked its protocol earlier this year to make it possible to use the standard @handle. And of course, decentralizing means that Sui NS will be launching its own token and spinning out from Miston Labs, which of course built the protocol. This is significant because Sui NS's NS token could become one of the blue chips on Sui. Consider, for example, that Ethereum Name Service's ENS token is an Ethereum blue chip. Now here's where things get interesting. As I mentioned in the introduction, and I'm sure most of you had noticed, Sui pumped a lot last week. I mean, its price literally doubled. And this has left everyone wondering, why? And answers have ranged from everything from influencers shilling Sui to Grayscale buying Sui for its trust. Our research suggests that there are 3 reasons why it pumped, and it's possible that each of these played a role in part. The first reason is because of what I just mentioned, the launch of Grayscale's Sui Trust. It seems this has led to speculation that Sui will eventually get a spot ETF of its own. But if you watched our video about which altcoins could be next to get a spot ETF, you'll know that it's unlikely we will see any other spot altcoin ETFs in the near future. And that's just because the precursor to the spot ETFs launching was a futures instrument listing on the CME exchange. And right now, only Bitcoin and Ethereum have had those. But surely Grayscale's trust will result in more Sui demand, right? Well, not exactly. You see, Grayscale's trusts are not like spot ETFs. Whereas ETF shares are issued and redeemed in real time, the shares in Grayscale's trusts are not. This lag in issuance and redemptions results in huge premiums or discounts. Put simply, even if Grayscale's Sui Trust sees large inflows, it won't lead to instant buying pressure for Sui like it would with spot ETFs, for example. Depending on when these issuance and redemptions take place, Grayscale's Sui Trust could literally have zero effect on Sui's prices, beyond, of course, just pure speculation. And that's why we think the second reason why Sui pumped played a much bigger role in the recent rally. This was a launch of a new consensus mechanism on Sui's mainnet called Misty SETI. In short, Misty SETI reduces transaction finality to milliseconds. Theoretically, making Sui the fastest blockchain. If you're confused, then you definitely need to watch our video about the fastest cryptocurrencies, which admittedly does need a bit of an update. The TLDR is that transactions per second are arguably not the best metric for speed. The best metric is finality, that is, how long it takes for a transaction to be considered final. Anyways, the reason why we think this played a bigger role in Sui's recent pump is because it's likely to attract a lot more institutional attention. The untold secret of smart contract cryptocurrencies is that it's a race to the bottom in terms of fees, speed, and usability. And Sui could even get ahead of Solana in this race. However, the third reason why Sui pumped seems to have played the biggest role, and that's DeFi leverage. According to DeFi Llama, the total value locked on Sui's DeFi protocols spiked even more than its price. And what's fascinating is that most of this TVL spike came from lending and borrowing protocols. It's possible that Sui whales deposited large amounts of Sui into these protocols as collateral to borrow more Sui, or just borrowed more against their existing Sui. And it's likely this would be done by borrowing stablecoins to buy Sui. Lo and behold, DeFi Llama reveals a massive spike in stablecoin TVL on Sui. In other words, yes, it looks like most of Sui's recent rally was driven by DeFi borrowing, which is pretty crazy. Anyhow, when we zoom out and look at its price action, it looks exactly like we expected it would in our previous update. To refresh your memory, we predicted that Sui would keep crashing because its on-chain indicators had started rolling over, and it subsequently fell by 50% after that video went live. Obviously, Sui has since recovered, and it is now coincidentally around the same level it was when we last covered it. The difference is that this time, the supply and demand equation is looking much better. On the supply side, it has grown by roughly 250 million since late May. If we assume an average price of around 50 cents per Sui, which is a conservative estimate, then this works out to around $125 million of potential sell pressure. And that sounds like a lot, but it's not that bad when it's spread out over a 3-month period. And it's also unlikely that all of this new Sui that entered circulation was subsequently sold. Meanwhile, on the demand side, the number of daily transactions and daily active wallets has flatlined, according to SuiScan. And this is good because it means there's only one way that this metric can go, and that's up. Notably, this flat line in activity underscores the idea that DeFi whales were behind the recent rally. To be fair, it does look like there was a small spike in new accounts on the Sui blockchain, and this is probably a consequence of retail investors aping into the recent rally. For once, their FOMO could pay off because it looks like Sui has a lot more room to run, both in the short term and in the long term. In the short term, Sui could reclaim its spring highs of around $2. If it manages to break above this high, then the next target would be somewhere around $3, possibly as high as $4. And this would work out to around a 3 to 4x from Sui's current price and a 6 to 8x from its lows. Kudos to those who double down. In the longer term, Sui could pull a 10 to 20x from its current price. And this would give it a market cap of around $35 billion or around $70 billion, respectively. A note that these longer-term price targets do factor in the unlocks we're likely to see over the next year, which are actually quite gradual compared to the cliff we saw in May. More importantly, these longer-term price targets are based on the assumption that Solana competitors like Sui, for example, are following Sol one cycle behind. To put things into perspective, Sol hit a market cap of around $70 billion in the last cycle. Logically, this means that should Sui follow suit, it could be as much as a 20x in market cap from here. The caveat, though, is that Sui faces lots of competition from other Solana challenges, like Aptos, for example, which many of you will know has a shared history with Sui. The two crypto projects are essentially two sides of the same coin. The coin in question being Facebook's failed digital currency Libra, aka Diem, which died in early 2022. As such, it's possible that Sui and APT could end up sharing most of that $70 billion target. And this would bring Sui's share to around $35 billion, which would be about a 10x from here. From our perspective, something closer to a 20x is more likely, particularly if Solana manages to clinch that spot ETF early next year, as some are expecting. That's because it would lay the groundwork for other altcoin ETFs to essentially speedrun the application process. And some of you will know that Grayscale's Solana Trust has been trading at a massive premium to net asset value. And you'll recall that it recently launched a Sui Trust. Say, if you want to maximize your Sui returns, be sure to check out the Coin Bureau deals page. It's got trading fee discounts of up to 70% and sign-up bonuses of up to $100,000 on the best crypto exchanges. You see, these deals are available exclusively to Coin Bureau viewers, and they won't be around for long. So take advantage of them ASAP, using the link in the description. Anywho, whether Sui can hit a 3 to 4x in the short term or a 10 to 20x in the long term ultimately depends on its upcoming milestones. Sui actually published a developer roadmap on its forum back in January, and it seems that most of these milestones have either been met or are already in the process of being rolled out. Thankfully, additional milestones can be found in presentations by and interviews with members of the Sui team. Back in May, Sui co-founder Kostas Hialkis did a technical presentation about zero-knowledge proofs, wherein he seemed to have implied that they were working on quantum-resistant tech. And this is significant, as quantum resistance seems to be a growing narrative, both inside and outside of the crypto industry. You can check out our recent video about why quantum could be the next big narrative, using that link in the description, of course. Now, back in June, Sui co-founder Adeniyi Abiodun revealed in an interview that the project continues to be hyper-focused on making the user experience as seamless as possible. And in a July interview, he revealed that Sui is focused on gaming and DeFi, and to a lesser extent, commerce. If this sounds familiar, that's because Toncoin appears to be taking a similar approach to mass adoption. If you watched our recent review, you'll know that it sees GameFi as a means of increasing the liquidity and activity in its DeFi ecosystem. In turn, this creates the ideal conditions for general digital commerce. The difference in this case is that Sui is developing its own hardware, specifically a handheld gaming device that's scheduled to be released sometime in 2025. Newsflash, but this is reminiscent of Solana's own strategy of boosting adoption and awareness with its Saga phone. Sui is reading the room. In that same interview, Adeniyi revealed that Sui will soon be lowering the staking requirements to become a validator. Right now, around 30 million Sui is required to become a validator. That's almost $30 million. And this will be lowered to 1 million Sui, but it's still a pretty penny, even at today's prices. Now, for what it's worth, Adonai also revealed that they plan on rolling out light clients sometime towards the end of the year. And this will make it possible for mobile phones to help secure the Sui blockchain. Between now and then, though, the focus will be on optimizing Sui following the implementation of Misty Ceti. As with most other crypto projects, it seems that Sui is planning on making big announcements in September. Adonai hinted that most of these announcements will happen at the Korea Blockchain Summit in the first week of September, and that one of these announcements will involve more native stablecoin support. All we're wondering is why the number of Sui full nodes was removed from SuiScan. We noted in our previous review that the number of full nodes had fallen by 4 times, presumably due to the growing size of Sui's blockchain. Adonai was asked about Sui's centralization in that interview, and his answer wasn't too convincing. And this, of course, brings me on to the challenges that we foresee for Sui. The first challenge is, well, transparency, which continues to be an issue in our opinion. For instance, we have yet to see any meaningful details about the structure of the Sui Foundation and its operations, something that's been a thorn in the side of the project for some time. To bring you up to speed, the Sui Foundation has been accused of selling supposedly staked Sui tokens on multiple occasions. In fact, the Sui Foundation was reportedly being investigated by South Korean authorities over allegations of supply manipulation. It's not clear what the status of the investigation is. Another example is something I just mentioned, and that's the apparent removal of important details from Sui's explorers. We checked our previous materials to make sure we weren't seeing things. As you can see, the full node count was noted on SuiScan when we last covered the project. Now, it's not. And this ties into the second challenge we foresee for Sui, and that's adoption. In case Sui's on-chain analytics didn't make it clear enough, most of the recent price action appears to have come from Sui whales playing around in its DeFi protocols. It's not a new use case or even new retail investors. Not to burst your bubble, but this is standard practice in crypto, and it's meant to encourage more actual adoption. So far, though, Sui's adoption seems to be lackluster relative to what it has to offer. To be fair, this is mostly a consequence of the current market sentiment and the relative absence of new retail investors. The thing is that Sui hasn't really created a narrative for itself yet. On the one hand, it seems to be leaning into gaming with its handheld device and its explicit strategy of using gaming as an adoption tool. On the other hand, though, it brands itself as a project trying to decentralize the internet, which is a bit vague. One could argue that at this stage in crypto's development, layer ones are starting to find their own niches and narratives. Sui hasn't really done this yet. And this relates to the third challenge we foresee for Sui, and that's competition. For example, Sui is going to have a hard time competing against Toncoin on the gaming front. At the same time, they're going to have a hard time keeping up with Solana after the Fire Dancer upgrade goes live, whose initial launch is likewise expected in September. Aptos also has big announcements coming in September that could make it stand out and take more of the attention away from Sui and its ecosystem. Check out our recent interview with Arthur Hayes, who seems to be a pretty big Aptos bull. All things considered, though, Sui still has incredible potential. And it looks like it's well positioned to be one of the top performing altcoins this cycle. So far, Sui has proven that it can overcome any challenge, including the major outage its mainnet experienced on the 5th of July. The team is rock solid and has delivered more in a year than most crypto teams do in a decade. If it can keep up this exponential growth, then it should reflect in exponential gains in price. Let's just hope that Sui doesn't get too inspired by Solana and start having outages more frequently. And that's all for today's video. If you found it informative, smash that like button to let us know. And if you want to stay informed about promising crypto projects, then subscribe to the channel and ping the notification bell as well. And if you want to inform others about Sui, well, then share this video with them. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Nick, out.